when I was offered to go to Manila to represent the United States on the board of the Asian Development Bank, I was very hesitant because, for one, I'm an economist, but essentially I was in banking, investments. I was not a specialist in economic development. I had interest in that, but I was not a specialist in that field. Particularly knowing that the bank at that time was short of capital for 3 or 4 years. They had only a capital of 24 billion, and they would like to make it 50. Okay, and they was hitting the ceiling. I was not so sure, and I was 67 at that time, and I wasn't so sure I want to leave and go somewhere else. That was 1990, late 1992, early 93. So in doubt, I called my most important mentor in my life, my mother. She lives in Hong Kong. She lived in Hong Kong. So I called her up. I said, Mother, you know, I don't know whether I should say, yes, I would accept if nominated. Okay. Well, my mother was not waiting for me to finish my sentence. Said, I don't understand why you're hesitating. You were born in Asia. Isn't it about time you come back and do something for Asia? Well, that settled it. I said, yes. I said, if nominated, I will serve. Fortunately for me, I had to wait 6 months before Senate confirmation. So I had this time really to do a lot of work, understanding both the bank, its mission, and particularly the culture of that bank. Because I've never worked in an institution with 58 members, a staff come from 58 countries, and a board of 12 that represents 58 countries' interests. Indians, Indonesians, Japanese, Koreans, Germans, Dutch. So I had a chance to try to understand, and also to understand the background of each of my colleagues, where they come from, what department they come from. Are they from the economic development of their ministry, or finance, or development bank, you know. So I did as much as I could to learn, but I made a lot of mistakes. I made lots of mistakes. One of which was, I thought it's only common sense. Now here is the danger. From my perspective, common sense, that the mission of a development institution is to work itself out of business. That means your clientele have developed such a level they don't need external assistance. They can regenerate, build on their own momentum, their own expertise, their own infrastructure to I mean, that's common sense, right? You don't want the people to be always dependent on you. But that was sort of heresy. But I thought it was common sense. I didn't think from the perspective of the other people. The next mistake I made was, I thought, well, the bank was very short of capital, only 24 billion, and was just running on the basis of reflow. They needed to double the capital. The United States and Japan are the two major shareholders, each with about 15 or 16% of the shareholding. And our government had, and still has, the habit of committing itself, but not paying its bills. Because, as I was informed, that is subject to appropriation by Congress, and one Congress cannot burden the next Congress, the responsibility of appropriation. So we were many years in arrears. So I said, well, yeah, look, even if you do double the capital, no amount of money or capital could ever fund the development needs of the vast Asia with billions of people, you know, in poverty. The best thing is to help those countries to build up their own private sector, have the kind of institutions that would empower and enable private capital deposits from mattresses to the banks to be recycled for development, infrastructure, business lending, and so on. So I was surprised to find that the board, the bank, did not have a policy of private sector development in designing its assistance programs for the developing member countries. So again, from my perspective, it was common sense again. This is very dangerous to think about as common sense, that we should really devote on having a very constructive, clear policy from the board on how to design programs such that can help the developing member countries to grow their own private sector. Well, so I tabled this within the first 2 months when I got on the job in late '93. And you know when it emerged for board discussion? October 1999, 6 years later. And the joke at that time was, we better table this for discussion because otherwise Ambassador Yang is never going to retire from the bank. And again, I was not effective that I had to delay and keep on working on it, keep on working on it, keep on working on it for 6 long years before it emerged, because as a director, you do not control the board agenda. If it does not appear on the board agenda, you're forever buried. Okay. I did not understand the culture of the bank. The culture of the bank is a development institution. Private sector is maximizing profit. The way the other end, contradictory. That's the mindset. Okay. My colleagues on the board, most of them came from Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economic Development, you know. And they came here for 2 or 3 years. They went back, and their brownie points is how much money they brought back from the bank. On their tenure, they brought back $500 million of lending from the bank. Okay. I mean, they are interested. They were very keen on development, but on the other hand, that's their career path. And having private sector involved is extremely messy, very messy. A lot of conditionalities, you know, and contradictory. They want profit, profit, profit. So, anyway, it took me a long time to understand why that what I consider to be a common sense proposal met such resistance. Got buried for 6 years. But finally, it did appear. It did appear. Finally, it was approved by the board. It's very important. I understand the culture of that bank institution is that if something is approved by the board, then the staff would have, when they go to negotiate with the recipient entity, would say, now, it's not that I insist on certain private sector, you know, conditionalities or do this or that. The board policy, and your director on the board voted for it. In a way, I paved the way for the bank staff in formulating their policy. It took me a long time to learn. I had the pleasure of returning to the bank in January of this year to give a talk. And one of my, I met with the new vice president of private sector operation, who is an Indian woman, very capable. And she told me they just had a strategic plan for year 2020 for the bank. And they want private sector operation to account to 1/2 of the bank's total volume of business. Right now it's 13%. had I understood the culture, had I understood where each of the directors and the very powerful bureaucracy in the bank, where they're coming from, their culture, for that, I probably didn't have to wait for 6 years, maybe 3 years would do.